All right. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Happy Accidents podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Stuart Ness. Stuart is going to be the first one-on-one interview of the channel. So I think this is going to be a banger. I think we're going to have a good one. So this is Stuart Ness. We became good friends when I lived in Ecuador, and he's a very intelligent, humorous gentleman. He's a great English teacher and a good friend. Um, we I've been friends with Stuart for about, I would say, 8 years, maybe 9 years now. And it's been quite a laugh, quite a funny 9 years. We've had a good time. We've had many good times. And Stuart, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Well, hi guys. Thanks very much, Steve, first of all, for allowing me to come on join the podcast, Happy Accidents. It's an honor for me to be here. Yeah, I was going to say we've known each other at least, I would think, at least 9 years, if not 10. It's coming up to a decade. I can't believe how fast time has gone. Um, yeah, well, I'm originally from the UK, and I came to Ecuador about 16 or so years ago as a volunteer, and consequences of situations like accidents and things like that allowed me to come back and finish something that I hadn't completed. Like the voluntary work was cut short because of the bus crash that I was involved in back in April of God knows when, I can't remember, 2008, I think it was. Um, but as a result of that, I came back because I'm stubborn and I want to finish what I start. So I came back and stayed, basically. Met someone, got married, have a fantastic daughter, and have stayed ever since. I love the country. It's fantastic. It's really, really nice. It's a beautiful place. And yeah, I've made my life here.
That's
Hmm.
right.
Yeah.
So, Stu, this is a great place to jump off. So, could you tell the audience about the project that you were working on and tell us a little bit about the bus crash and that whole fiasco?
Oh God. Oh, right. Okay. Well, originally the project was a voluntary trip. We had 18 of us in the bus and in the group, and we were originally planning to go through and travel all the way down South America, down to Patagonia. But as a result of the situation, I came here. I'm in Quito. I'm based in Quito in Ecuador, and I came here originally and stayed in a hostel, had intensive Spanish classes for about a week or two. Then we got on the bus and went to Lares in Peru, and that's over the other side of the Andes, if anyone knows where they are. And there we built a community house, a casa comunal, out of adobe and cast iron. It was
Nice.
amazing, an
And
amazing experience.
what was the house for, or who lives in the house now?
It was just a community space for the
Oh, yeah.
locals.
Oh, gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
so it was a sort of a meeting house, a main hall sort of idea for people to
And
come together.
was this in a rural setting
It
or?
was it was extremely rural,
Oh, wow.
extremely rural. Yes, we set up camp. We were in tents under canvas, and we set up camp in the yard on the playing field of a local school,
Okay.
and that was great. And we built the house out of adobe bricks and everything else, literally mixing the bricks and forming them out of dirt and earth and straw and everything.
Awesome.
It was a great experience, but it was messy. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
messy. Really good fun though, but so fulfilling. It was
I
really
bet.
fulfilling. Loved it.
And
Loved it.
so were you working with an NGO, or how was your group
It was
financing
it was
this?
actually organized by a travel company based in the UK. They were based in Warwick. I think they're still there. They're called Venture Co.
Okay.
And they they offer these programs, or they offered the program for various people to contribute a certain amount of money, and then get together in the target country where they were offering the situation, and go and work and help the locals, help
Oh,
communities.
nice. Okay.
Um, so yeah, it wasn't an NGO as such. So, but it was a great experience. The idea was to travel from Quito, to go to Puerto Lopez on the coast and build sanitation, to build public toilets and
Wow.
things in local schools in Puerto Lopez, and then travel a lot down south, down South America, and get down eventually to Patagonia and then fly home.
Okay, so Ecuador was the starting point and then work
Ecuador
your
was
way
the
down.
starting point, and then going down
Okay.
south. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, and how many people were part of this group with you in Ecuador?
And for me, it was 18 of us all together
18.
on the
Okay.
bus.
All right. So what happened
Yeah.
next?
Well, we went to Lares, we built the house and came back. It was fantastic. And then the next stage of the trip was to go from Quito down to Puerto Lopez, and we got on the bus and we left. And unfortunately, the bus didn't arrive. We were involved in a very serious accident um, on the way to Puerto Lopez. It was in Hippie Hapa, if people know where that was. And the bus was hit by one of these big earth moving trucks, and
Wow.
literally wiped out the left hand side of the bus,
Wow.
completely destroying it. Unfortunately, um, 5 members of the group were taken in the accident. They were killed instantly, unfortunately. um,
Wow.
I was very close to injuring myself severely. I had, you know, part of the structure of the bus was about that close from my head
Wow.
when I came to, after crashing my mouth and my face
So,
on the
so
seat in front of me.
were you knocked out?
I knocked myself semi-conscious, yeah.
Wow.
And I busted my lip. My whole face was, my lip was hanging off. It was a
So,
mess. I had to go home and have stitches. I almost lost my front 2 teeth. It
wow.
was a severe situation. Yeah,
So
very.
do you remember what you felt in that moment of, the moment that you regain consciousness and you're looking around and you realize you're not at home, you're not in the UK, and you're in a foreign country and you've just been in a very serious accident. Do you remember what you were thinking and what you were feeling at that moment?
Well, I thought I was honestly going to die, and I thought that was the end of life.
Hmm.
I honestly thought that.
Did you feel
Um,
fear? Did
I
you feel
felt severe fear.
fear?
I felt um, I wanted to go home. I just literally wanted to go home, you know, to escape the whole situation. I thought this was a very surreal situation. I thought, what the hell is going on? It's weird, very odd, very weird. But as a result of that, I was taken to the local hospital. I was literally semi-conscious. We had the local passers-by in their pickup trucks. I was laying in the back of the pickup truck, in the flatbed of the pickup truck, and taken to the local hospital. It
That's
was that
and
weird.
did you have your passport and everything on you? Did you have all
Yes,
Okay, wow.
yes.
Unbelievable. Okay,
It
so
was
how
really
how
weird.
how long were you in hospital and what happened after that? I mean, did you go directly back to the UK? What happened?
No, I was in hospital just to get checked up, and to stitch up the lip, and to clean up the surface injuries effectively. Um, and then we came back to Quito as a group. We had to do an international press conference in the Hilton Hotel here in Quito. because we had international members of the group. We had people from France, we had loads of people from the UK, so it was a really bizarre situation. We had all the international press, we had the British press, we had local press.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
very bizarre.
So
Very
so this
bizarre.
was news. This was a big thing.
Yeah, it was huge.
Wow.
It
Wow.
was huge.
Well, I imagine. And the five individuals who passed away, were they
Mhm.
from the UK as well, or from France, or
They were from the UK.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So you do the press conference at the Hilton, and then where do you go from there?
Then from there, we stayed in the Hilton under lock and key. Basically, we didn't want anyone to be, asking us, because the press were hounding to find out all the details, and we thought, no, we're not having that. So we were put up in the Hilton and kept away from public eye for a while
By whom? By the company?
by the company. And this was in the time of when Mr. Correa had recently come into office, and he was very, very helpful.
Oh,
His government was extremely helpful, um, in that we had recently gone to the president's house in Plaza Grande here in Quito. So he knew of us.
oh.
And as a result of the crash, he thought, hang on, I've just seen them. And he got involved.
Mm.
And with his help, everything was shut down for us. It was great.
Wow. Wow.
It was excellent.
Well, I'm sure that he didn't want to tarnish the image of the country either in
Of
terms of
course not.
tourism,
No, absolutely not. No, of
right?
course.
Because it doesn't look good for tourism.
No,
But
no.
but obvious. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm happy that he helped you, but I don't know if those actions were solely altruistic. Perhaps they were also
No, maybe they had an ulterior motive, but
right, like everything.
I'm not going to discuss
Right.
that.
No, no, no.
We're not here to discuss that.
Yeah.
The fact is that, you know, so we did this press conference in the Hilton. Then we flew back to our respective countries. I went back home to the UK and got my dentistry and everything sorted out. Thankfully, I've still got the original teeth.
Nice, nice.
It's really, really nice. It was just a severe strike on my teeth and slight nerve damage. So I was super sensitive. I couldn't bite anything
Oh wow.
for
Wow.
a while. I had to eat from the side of my mouth. It was very difficult.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how long were you in the UK
Would you
after
believe I was only back in the UK for 6 weeks?
6 weeks?
6 weeks.
And then you went back
Then I
to
came back here.
well, I can understand that. Because your trip was cut short, not because you wanted it to, but
No,
the goal was unfinished. So
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. It was unfinished. And I, as I say, I'm stubborn. I like to finish what I do. And when I was back in the UK, I went, traveled from the south coast, from the southwest up to Bristol on a bus with my father. We made a point of doing that, and I sat in exactly the same seat that I was on the original bus here, to face my fear, to get over it as quickly as possible.
And so you did that how long after arriving to the UK?
Within the first week,
Within the first week,
within the first week, the
you were
first thing
ready to go.
was I went to the
Wow.
dentist,
Now, was
got
that your
myself.
dad's idea, or was that your idea?
We came to it as a mutual idea. Yeah, it was
Wow,
mutually.
that's I feel like that's a really good thing to do.
It
Did
helped
you
me a
did
lot.
you have a panic attack at that moment, or
Oh yeah, I had flashbacks and everything.
I
It
believe
was horrible,
I
but I
believe
sat there and I made myself go through it. I made myself go through it. It was a very, very difficult situation, but I'm here. I'm out the other side of it. I'm back in South America. I've been here now 16 years. I don't view the UK as my home anymore, because my immediate family, I don't live there. I've got one cousin who lives there now, and my aunts and uncles, but I haven't seen them for years, but I want to go back and visit them. But my immediate family, my parents, my brother, my sister, my nephews, they're all living outside the UK now.
And where are they at now?
They're in New Zealand.
In New Zealand.
They're in New Zealand, and they're loving it.
And so, having grown up in the UK, and I know that you've visited New Zealand as well, you've mentioned that. Um, what are some of the differences? I mean, what made your folks decide to leave their home and, the place that they grew up and go to halfway across the world to the, a
Yeah,
remote
it's
island?
literally the other side of the world, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, when I originally came to South America to do my voluntary work, um, 2 weeks before I left, my brother left with his wife to live in New Zealand because her brother lived in New Zealand or lives in New Zealand.
mhm.
So they had an in, they had a connection there for the help for doing all the paperwork and the visas and all the translocation of everything. Um, and then at this time, my sister was living in the Middle East. She was living in the United Arab Emirates in Dubai, and so my parents were thinking, well, all our children are leaving us. What the hell are we going to do? We're
Right.
stuck in the UK with nobody. Yeah, where should we go? And at the time, my nephews were very, very, very young boys. Um, and for problems of language or lack of problems for language, they decided to go to New Zealand,
Mm, okay.
which
Okay.
makes sense. They have come here and visited me um, once or twice when my beautiful daughter Olivia was born to meet her and that. But then the language problems that they have, both they don't speak Spanish.
Mm.
They
So
don't
they really
understand.
can't communicate.
Yeah, they can't effectively communicate. So they thought, well, we can't come and can't locate ourselves in South America because we'll have a problem. So they decided to go to New Zealand, which is like the UK was back in the 50s and 60s and 70s,
In what sense?
in the way that the lifestyle, it was very relaxed, it's very open, security wasn't a problem. And they felt at home. It was like taking them back to what they remember.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. So, and we'll get into this a little bit later about how the UK has changed since you were a kid and the current state of the country now.
Ooh,
But, obviously, I think immigration is a touchy subject, right?
yeah.
I think that for those of us who have been blessed enough to be born in a country where people want to immigrate, um, for us, it's understandable why people from Egypt or people from Sudan or why people from Morocco or people from the regions around the UK immigrate to the UK. It's clear, right? They want a better life. They want security. They want stability, prosperity. But unfortunately, when we see societies become melting pots, and the same goes for the United States, it changes the lifestyle of the people who were there, 50 years ago before the big influxes of migration. Uh,
Mhm.
when you were a kid, Stu, in the UK, did you see a lot of immigrants?
Honestly, no.
No.
No, growing up in the UK, it was a very, I don't know how to say this really, but the society there was kind of exclusive.
Mhm.
The borders weren't as as open as they are currently.
Right.
So the influx from Europe effectively didn't happen. We had foreign travel and family holidays when we were growing up, but it was
Right.
more domestic, going to see, relatives, grandparents, and aunts and uncles and things like that for holidays time. But international travel, I remember the first international travel and trip that I did was to Spain. And we did it through um, an overnight train,
That's
a
awesome.
sleeper train from London. Yeah, we actually it wasn't. It was from London. We took the train from London. We went down to the south coast at Dover. We got on the hovercraft, as was in service then. Hover Speed was the company. We took the car on the hovercraft, and then we got to Calais, and we went to the train station, and we literally put the car on the train.
That's
It was
nuts.
nuts, absolutely
And
nuts.
what
And
year was this that you guys are on hover
this
car?
this must have been, oh God, I must have been 8, 10, something like, so 70s, 8, 7, 7, mid 70s, very early 80s,
Right.
if that. Um, and so we had the car on the train, and then we had what they call a couchette, which is French for a little sleeping space.
Oh,
One of these individual cabins for families, small groups to sleep.
hmm.
And we slept on these fold out bunk beds on a train. It was really bizarre. It was
But it
great.
was just
It
overnight.
was such an adventure,
I bet. I bet.
such an adventure. And then we went down to the south of France, took the train, took the car off the train, and then drove through Spain.
Right. Right.
Drove through Spain down to Malaga and through Barcelona. It was great. It was
Yeah.
fantastic. Down the
That's
coast.
a dream that I have to do something like that.
And it was bizarre. You think, this is my summer holiday. What an
Yeah.
awesome holiday. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Now you couldn't do that. Now you couldn't do that at all. For the security situation, for visas and everything else. But
So, let's talk about that for a second. I think it's important to not glance over this. You know, I mean, if we look at the last several hundred years,
mhm,
European nations were, you know, colonizers, and they colonized, as you know, the globe, not just the Brits, but the
yeah.
Spaniards and the French and, the Dutch, whatnot. But essentially, you had a period where Europe was just conquering the world. After that, you had a period where European countries were extracting the wealth from these territories.
hmm
Eventually, you had movements of independence in all of these different countries, right? Ecuador being an example, the independence from Spain, the
Yeah.
United States being another example, the independence from Britain. But essentially, you had a period where the European nation monarchies withdrew from their colonized territories, and those territories formed nations. And those nations, because they had been essentially built from the rubble of, you know, colonizers, uh, had a tendency to have some problems and, be a little bit disorganized and whatnot.
Mm.
And I think that the immigration that we're seeing from the developing world to the quote, developed world is due to this. I believe that these nations that were colonies, essentially, after the Europeans extracted the wealth and withdrew their forces, they left those communities with nothing but problems.
Exactly.
And
I
those,
think it's a point that all the resources were extracted and taken out of the countries.
well, the
Uh,
resources, but also the culture. Think about what happened culturally. If we look at Native Americans in North, Central, or South America, I
mhm.
mean, essentially, Native Americans were displaced, right? And their wealth was taken, So this affects culture, right? This affects the mindset of the people. So, and this is just my theory, Stu. You tell me what you think, but I think that all the immigration that we're seeing, immigration into the United States, immigration into the UK, into different European nations, is a product of a few generations of, you know, serious social issues that have affected these colonies, places that were colonies, and the situation has become unlivable. And people want stability and a better life. So they're going to the nations that were the colonizer nations or the monarchy nations. And we can look at the Caribbean. I feel like the Caribbean is a really great example. Within the Caribbean, you've got Cuba, you've got Haiti, and you've got Jamaica, right? They all speak different languages. They speak the languages of the colonizing countries.
Yeah.
And look at the state of the people there. I mean, it's pretty serious. It's pretty desperate. And these are island nations. These aren't nations that have an abundance of resources. So
Oh,
essentially, when we look at nations like Haiti or Jamaica or Cuba or the Dominican Republic, these were nations where the indigenous peoples who lived on these islands originally were either wiped out or mixed in with the Spanish and the African slave
mhm.
descendants. And that's where you get your modern Cuban or your modern Haitian or your modern, and we know this term as mestizo,
Yeah.
right? But this
Yeah.
is why, if you look at Cubans, there is no stereotype Cuban. A Cuban could be a person with a light complexion and blue eyes. It could be an African person. It could be a mix of those.
Exactly. And
And this
I
is all
think this is a result of, as you say, the colonizers coming across and diluting both the nations both culturally and genetically.
correct. Correct.
And
And extracting the wealth.
as a result, the local indigenous populations, they lose their culture. They don't know um, who they are anymore. They lose their identity.
Correct.
And I think it's a very harsh and strong pushback and
Yeah.
resistance from them now as a result of that, saying, no, we are who we are, and we're going to prove it to you and prove it to the world. Which is
Well,
why
that's true.
I'm thinking about Haiti. You mentioned Haiti, and I don't know if you've seen recently, but they've got gangs now
Yeah.
running the country. It's a mess. It's a
Yeah. There's no government.
serious mess. There's no government, and you know, how can that be fixed?
But Stu,
Yeah.
what can you expect from these people didn't come on a a cruise ship. The
No,
Haitians that are in Haiti, they didn't arrive to Haiti on a cruise ship, on a pleasure trip, on holiday, right? They were taken. They were taken. They were slaves. And
exactly.
what can we expect when we put people on an island and abandon them, taking after they're used and after the wealth is extracted, they're abandoned on the island and given freedom and told, okay, so it's up to you now.
Just get on with it. It's of course
And
it.
and then why do these nations not function? Right? It's very clear. And something that you said about the indigenous is so interesting. You know, being, half Ecuadorian myself, I've
Mhm.
really thought about this a lot. And I came to understand that the indigenous in Ecuador were conquered twice.
Oh,
I was saying that I believe that the indigenous were conquered twice,
mhm.
uh, not only by the Spanish, but also by the Inca, right? So I had the pleasure of working with a group of students who were from indigenous communities in Ecuador. And I asked them about their history before the Incan conquest, before the Inca moved up from Peru and conquered the Ecuadorian indigenous groups, the Cañari, the different groups that existed there. Who were they? What did they do? What kind of activities did they have?
Yeah.
And sadly and surprisingly, they were unable to tell me about their pre-Incan history. And they told me, Steve, we never thought about it. We considered ourselves Incan, essentially, but they're not, right? They were
Oh,
conquered by the Incas, but those aren't the original Ecuadorians, right? There are other indigenous groups that the Incans conquered, and then the Spanish came and conquered the Incans.
yep.
So it's important to kind of understand that nations in the Western Hemisphere, North and South America, are largely made up of conquered groups,
Mhm.
right? Who, after the colonial powers left, formed nations and created constitutions. And that's essentially what we have in North and South America. So it's
Yes,
incredible,
absolutely.
and this is, I think, why we see the immigration that we see. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And I can fully appreciate why why your group of students said they couldn't tell you about their history, because they've had effectively a double dilution of their cultural heritage and their, indigenous identity of who they actually were. And that comes as a result of this abuse of nations, effectively, because that's what colonization is, effectively. You know,
well, I don't know if it's an abuse of nations because
well,
there was no
maybe
nation.
not nations, because the
There were
nations haven't
states.
actually been
Right,
created at that point.
right,
It's abuse of indigenous peoples.
correct. But this is an interesting point to also analyze is how short-lived nation states have been. This idea of nation states really came around after the colonial empires went back to Europe.
Yeah,
This is the emergence of nation states, right? And there was no blueprint. There was no manual for how to correctly organize a society without a king or a queen.
so
How do you distribute um, and administrate the resources of a country? Do you form a country? Should it be based on the ethnicity of the people there? Should it be inclusive, including how do you do it? Right? So all of these groups, imagine Ecuador, right? Ecuador, depending on the region, had different indigenous groups that
yeah,
were not related to each other at all. So
no,
in current at, at present, you have the Guarani, which are in the Amazonian region of Ecuador,
mhm,
and when the nation of Ecuador was created after the independence from Spain, these people were included in that nation. They weren't asked if they wanted to be part of that nation, and they were lumped in with the Otavalos. They were lumped in with all of the different indigenous groups in Ecuador that are
yeah,
not they don't have a history of being one people. The only thing
true.
they had in common was the conquest of the Inca and the Spanish. So
Mhm.
then the nation of Ecuador is formed, and that's when we have, nation and state, this identity of Ecuadorian.
Exactly, exactly,
Before that, there was the
and
Gran.
it's difficult because there was no consultation. Do you want to be a part of a nation, a new nation? How do you want to um how do you want to be an influence or be a key point, a key part of it. You know, how do you want to function? How do you want the nation to function? How do you want to govern?
Right.
How should we govern? There's none of this consultation in general terms for any nation after colonization.
No.
It reminds me of the British Empire back
Hmm.
when that was at its height. How
Yeah.
was it governed? You know, I'm thinking of India effectively.
Right.
You had India's a massive country with various different provinces and locations,
And many different ethnicities.
many different ethnicities and tribes or groups of people. I wouldn't necessarily say tribes, but and they had the Raj, various Rajas,
Right.
and they were sort of, I suppose, the ruling princes
Right.
of the areas. And what happened? We as the Brits, we went in and said, "This is our country now. We're going to deal with it."
And you
And
know what's interesting, Stu, is that they did that because they had superior technology in terms of weapons.
exactly,
Because Europe had, you could say, development in, you know, weapons technology. I mean, obviously the Chinese created black powder, but in Europe you had, armor. People had armor. They were in the Iron Age. When we
yep,
when we understand that Europeans, when they went to South America, North America, and encountered Stone Age and Bronze Age people, and they're in the Iron Age, and they've got steel-plated armor, riding
mhm,
domestic animals, riding horses,
yep,
right? I mean, how this must have impacted people who were still in a different stage of development as a people. And
mhm,
for years, I didn't understand how that happened until I really started understanding that the spread of humanity, from the cradle of humanity in Africa, then to Europe, and then north to Russia and east to Asia, and then from there to North America. And the last place for humans to go was South America. So
yeah.
people in South America have not had enough time to develop what they developed in Europe.
They
So
didn't.
this,
They haven't experienced the transition period of development.
right,
You
right.
know,
So yeah,
and the movement of peoples up through North America into Russia and everything else, that was um, was influenced by climate and the necessity for change.
correct.
They had to evolve, otherwise it's evolve or die.
Well, not only that, but it's climate for sure, because ice ages and things,
Mhm.
they say that there was the Bering land bridge,
Yeah.
because it was ice, it was
Hmm.
glacier. But it's also, I think, because of warring tribes, right? So
Yes.
smaller groups needed to continue moving in order to find new resources and not have conflict with more powerful clans. Because I
Exactly.
believe that clans, before there were nations and before there were tribes and before there were indigenous peoples, there were clans, like family clans. And the clans that had the most people were generally the ones that had the most control. And so smaller clans had to continue moving and spreading across the planet,
Exactly.
constantly searching for, you know, a greener pasture, and
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
that's it's so amazing when you think that when the Spanish, I mean, just imagine, put yourself in the shoes of an indigenous person, pre-Columbian indigenous person, and you see on the horizon the Spanish Armada, just
Yeah.
ships, ships with
Hundreds of
cannon
ships on the horizon. You think,
on the horizon. It would be like an alien invasion.
yeah,
Would feel like a literal alien invade. You wouldn't know what to think.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's so incredible that our history is made from this, but it explains why many countries are in bad shape, because these countries have, I mean, the United States is a few hundred years old, right? Ecuador's a few hundred years old. They haven't had a lot of time to figure it out. And they were left with all of the social chaos that was created by the conquest. Remember, these
Yeah,
colonizers implemented a hierarchy based on ethnicity. The Spanish,
exactly.
they implemented a hierarchy based on the color of your skin,
Yeah,
right? And your descendants, your ancestry. The Spanish were at the top of that hierarchy. And then it was, there were
yeah,
different levels.
yeah.
But sadly, the indigenous and the Afro peoples, or the now Afro-Ecuadorians,
Hmm.
that were brought to Ecuador, had the lower levels of that hierarchy. And you say, why? Because power, power.
Power corrupts, as they say.
That's right. And they didn't have power, right?
No,
The Europeans had the power. They had the wealth. They had the technology. They had guns, right?
exactly.
So they took what they wanted. And after they took the gold and the wealth and decided, oh, we've had enough and this is wrong, we shouldn't do this. hmm they decided to go back to Spain. And then the people here that are either of Spanish descent or indigenous descent or Afro-Ecuadorian descent
Hmm.
are left to figure it out and put back the pieces and create a society from the rubble,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Without a blueprint or a pattern of a society, without a king or a queen.
Yeah.
Without a king or a queen, how do you
Yeah.
organize a society?
That's
So
it.
that's
It's true. But
like,
we could take this further back in time as well.
we could.
Not just the Spanish. We go back to the Romans and the Greeks,
Correct.
and they did the same.
They did the
They
same.
did the same, and
That's
we
human history.
yeah, exactly. They did the same. We have as you say, you've got the US as a very young nation, effectively, as is South America and Ecuador. But going back to the UK, we have, more than 2,000 years of history when
Correct.
Julius Caesar first came across in 44 BC.
Correct.
What did they do? The Romans came across with their technology, their style of warfare, their weaponry, their culture, and they imposed it on the British tribes.
You
You
guys
can't
were
see
considered the
anything like
barbarians.
exactly.
You guys were the barbarians. The
We were
Romans were the civilized. They had, democracy. They had forms of government. They had
exactly. They had the
aqueducts.
Senate
They had the Senate. They had fountains. They had public baths.
yeah.
But in the UK, or what was then the UK, was
Hmm.
clans, family clans
It was
of
family
quote
clans. We
unquote
had
barbarians.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And at the time we didn't like it, which is why we had Boadicea or Boudica, as she was called. She had an uprising, and that was in Essex and in the west of the country.
Right?
Sorry, east of the country. Sorry, east of the country in East Anglia and stuff like that, because we didn't like to be oppressed.
Of course not.
Of course not.
But
And
but
then
it
you
seems
can you
like
can
this is,
take it further north to Scotland and the Highlands. You were talking about clan warfare. Yeah, absolutely. The
oh yeah,
Scottish clans,
Braveheart.
my God, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Absolute madness.
I mean, watch Braveheart,
Exactly. Well,
William Wallace.
that sort of touches it,
But it was
but
a lot
it
worse.
was a lot worse than that. A lot worse than that. But
That's right.
that's with artistic license through the Hollywood eyeball, Um, but it was a lot worse. A lot
Now,
worse.
Stu, I have a theory about this. I think that agrarian societies more tend to be closer to the equator and the tropics due to the favorable conditions for harvest and
Yeah,
but I feel like warrior cultures come from the warrior cultures and agrarian societies don't really go hand in hand, right? Agrarian societies
No,
typically don't have a very pronounced warrior culture.
but I think that the warrior culture comes out of the agrarian society.
You do?
Yeah, I do, because originally all society is agrarian because you've
Yeah,
got to grow food
at some level.
at some level. You've got to
But
grow
there were,
food.
if we consider the Vikings or the barbarians, the Celts or
Exactly.
whatever they were, I would say, less agrarian than perhaps ancient Sumerians,
Yes.
right? They
Yeah.
were more warrior because, and the theory that I have is because of the seasons.
Mhm.
Because the seasons are so much shorter, you cannot extract the resources that you need for the whole year. This means that you have to go on raids. This means that you have to go steal. This means that you have to
Exactly.
hunt. This means that you
Exactly.
have to invade. As your population grows, the need for raiding and invading becomes more and more pronounced. So I could be wrong,
No,
but I think
I think you're right. I would agree with you in some ways of that because you know the Vikings we had them come across to the UK in 800 BC, I think it was. And they brought their culture, their warlike lingo and you know,
that,
language and stuff like that. And when we were the original Britons, we had our own language.
right,
But again, it got diluted, it got changed, it got, as they say in certain videos, streamlined.
right.
You know, they got blended with other language. And as a result, it's again conquering
Yeah,
because the Vikings wanted the resources because where they were in Scandinavia, they didn't have the resources or they ran out due to climate
short seasons.
and short seasons.
They
Exactly, as you
didn't
say.
have long seasons to grow corn and maize and
Exactly.
make
So they
flour and barley.
relocated.
Right.
They
So they have
relocated.
to travel further south to raid
Hmm.
from
Exactly.
those who have more favorable weather
Yeah,
conditions.
exactly. And more resources.
Now,
And
the
of course, being
Romans,
an island nation close to Scandinavia, it was an easy pickings.
that's right.
Um,
That's right.
but
But
then,
the Romans and the Greeks kind of, spit in the face of this theory, because they're more in the tropics. I mean, Italy, you could say, is closer to the tropics than, the northern hemisphere. I
yeah,
mean,
it's further south, so
it's
it's closer to the equator. It's a warmer climate,
a
definitely.
warmer climate.
Hmm.
So this doesn't necessarily explain how the Roman Empire became so vast and how and the Greeks as well. I mean, Greece is certainly not a place that gets super cold.
No, that's true. But I think the Roman Empire and the Greek empires they expanded through the egotistical way of thinking of the emperors and the rulers at the time. They were just power crazed and power hungry.
Well,
And
yeah, yeah,
and I think because there was such demand for what Rome and the Roman society wanted as you know to provide resources to maintain such a population, they had to go further afield and they had to conquer the Mediterranean nations around the Mediterranean Sea because of location.
right.
And you know, they went across the Mediterranean. They went into southern Europe, into Spain, into various locations, and they thought, yeah, these resources are good.
Oh
And
yeah.
so they thought, well, we know where to go, and they expanded into Europe further.
Well, not only into Europe. Remember, Alexandria, Egypt, was named after Alexander the Great.
Alexander the
I
Great
mean,
was, yeah,
the Greek conqueror who made it to Africa and even conquered Egypt.
he was what he was Macedonian, I believe, originally.
Right, right. So and now that takes us to Macedonia, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, and the
Yeah,
Mesopotamians, the Sumerians.
yeah,
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because it appears to me that you know historians and archaeologists there's some skepticism there, but they have a tendency to say that the cradle of civilization was in modern day Kuwait or Iraq, which was Mesopotamia, the land between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers.
Exactly.
And it just, it's hard for me to understand that what they propose basically, that this was the first civilization with a written language and an alphabet and mathematics and days of the week, et cetera, et cetera. But that's almost suggesting that before this great civilization, humans lived almost like hunter-gatherer type
Yeah.
nomadic lives,
Yeah.
and they were less agrarian and more hunter-gatherer. And it just it's so curious to see the drivers of development, right? The need, climate is a
I
driver.
think there are two drivers here, because earlier in this conversation you were talking about the cradle of life being in Africa.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
So
this that's
we
what they
got
say.
that source point in Africa,
Right.
but then you've also got the other source point in Sumeria,
Right. But
and in
one's the
Ur.
cradle of civilization, the other is the cradle of humanity.
Exactly. And there's a
Right.
difference.
There
There is
is.
a difference. The difference is humanity, yeah, that's where we were genetically created and we developed as humans, you know. But civilization, what's the difference between humanity and civilization?
Big difference.
Language.
Right.
Language.
And working together.
Exactly.
And
Language and
domestication,
knowledge and the
language, knowledge,
application of that.
domestication, agriculture.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, that's, think about from the time that scientists say the first humans emerged or whatever in Africa, from that moment until the first civilization in Sumeria, how
Hmm.
many thousands of years passed where humans were roaming Africa or roaming parts of Europe or roaming
Yeah.
the Mediterranean, looking for resources and family clans that were nomadic hunter gatherers, right?
Hmm.
Until
Yeah.
in this spot called the Fertile Crescent, in what
Yeah.
was called Sumeria, a group of clans, a group of big family clans decided to collaborate, work together, and
And
create
create
civilization.
civilization. Yeah.
But it's from then, it's always been conquest. That's what I'm
It
trying to
has.
say.
It
It's
has.
always been
It's always
conquest.
been an underlying search for resources and
Correct. And
survival.
power. Correct.
Survival.
So
That's what it
jumping
is.
back now, Stu, to the immigration thing we were talking about, I think this is why we see people moving into the UK, people moving into Canada and the United States from places that were
Yeah.
previously colonies, because
Yeah.
they want a better life, logically. I would do the same if I were in their shoes.
It's opportunism.
It's
Exactly.
opportunism. But it just it helps put things into perspective and understand our current reality might not always be reality. The Romans probably thought that the Roman Empire would go on forever.
They
The
did.
Brits,
They did.
the Brits thought that, man, we're going to be on top of the world forever. And
Uh-huh.
now we see something very different. So it makes me think, what will our world be like in 100 years? Will there be nation states? I personally believe that there will be corporate states. I think that Google will have a country,
Oh God.
Twitter will have a country, or X, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But because it seems to me that these are the new kings and queens of our world. Who has the real power in our current world? It's not the people,
No.
it's the top 1%. Who makes the top 1%? It's not the people in the government, it's the people
No.
who run the people in the government,
It's
the billionaires.
the clandestine people behind in the shadows, effectively.
Correct. And so we don't
It's
have kings and queens essentially or technically like they used to be, right?
no.
Family groups that were, you know,
No.
where the crown was passed from generation to
Exactly.
generation. We don't have that now, but we have these, tech companies or just giant corporations that wield the power of kings back in the day.
Hmm.
And I think that we're going to see a change from nation state into some type of corporate state. And
Maybe. I think there may be some sort of, I don't know, maybe global government, if you can call it government,
I mean,
global
well,
control, possibly of some description. I don't know what sort of form it would take, but as you say, the corporations who wield the power, they wield that power through finance,
correct.
through finance.
Stu, I think we can see if you follow, the breadcrumbs, which is essentially the money trail,
Exactly.
you know, you can see kind of what's happening. It appears to me that if you look into the ESG score, if you look into, why companies are implementing certain policies to get higher ESG scores, when you look at a lot of different data, you see that it appears that globalization is essentially trying to create like an all-inclusive, quote, open society where there are no nations, there are no borders. There's
Mhm.
simply the the oligarchs and
Yeah,
the whole world.
exactly.
And they're selling us this bill of goods saying it's a more inclusive society and that nationalism is actually bad and toxic, right? This is what we're being told.
Yes.
We're being told nationalism is
Hmm.
bad. It's anti-human.
Yeah,
That's what they're telling us. But it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know because I'm telling you, Stu, power is evolving once again,
it is.
going from nation states into
It
corporate.
is. I think it's the massive corporations, and I can't name any particular ones, but we know how it is. I think that they are looking for a means of control and effectively the control
Oh, of course.
of money.
They
And
don't
as a
want
result
control of
of
our
that, they have
lives.
to control the populations of certain countries and nations. They're looking for just trade, effectively.
Correct.
That's it. And there's no one answer to it, really. They're looking for an idealistic thing to benefit the corporation.
But they found a successful model, the Chinese model.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this is what I think is happening. I think that whoever the people are that want to have that one world government, they want to implement the Chinese model because the Chinese model integrates parts of components of capitalism
Communism.
in terms
Mhm.
of production,
Yeah.
but it also implements authoritarianism or, you know, totalitarianism.
Yeah.
Um, so it appears that this model is great for production and
Hmm.
and managing large groups of people like the Chinese
Yeah.
population.
So it's showing to the population, to the layman, effectively, that they have opportunities. They will have jobs because they'll be put into the production sector or industrial sectors. So they'll feel they're happy because they're earning, money, albeit not a lot of money, but they're having, enough money to survive. And it's because what they don't know, they're not aware of how vast that gap is between production at grassroots level up to those who are in control. The amount of money and the difference in wealth distribution is
Oh, it's
it's
unbelievable.
astronomical. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And
And
until the lower echelons of society, the laymen, actually wake up and see that for themselves, we're going to be an oppressed global community.
But Stu, what I'm saying is it's always been like that. There have always been people who have
Yeah.
wield power.
Yeah.
So if you, what I think is interesting is to look at history through the lens of power
Hmm.
and look at how power has traversed history and simply mutated and changed from clans to kingdoms, and from kingdoms to empires, and from empires to nation states, and from nation states to corporations.
Well, it hasn't actually changed that much.
No, it
It's
just simply goes to a different group
it,
of people,
yeah.
but
It's
power
just
is the same.
it's like some sort of virus, effectively, that goes through societies and through nations and just mutates and adapts to take full advantage of the current situation it's in. And it's done that through from Greek times up to now.
But
It's just
perhaps
it's
this is,
just it's just got a different name, a different skin, effectively. But
oh,
it's the same monster underneath everything.
perhaps this is encoded in our DNA.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is the ultimate fight for survival.
Hmm.
Right? I mean, if we look at, animals, for example, if we look at the savannah in Africa, you see animals jockeying for survival.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what humanity is doing, right? Trying to, powerful, groups use influence and power to obtain resources and and spread the power structure in the hierarchy.
Exactly.
And it's happened since the beginning of humanity, and I don't think it's going to end. However, the game changer is AI.
Oh
These
boy.
corporations
Yeah.
are using, intelligent language models, and
Exactly.
there are predictions and projections that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, Stu.
Yes. Yes.
Humanity will be deeply affected, and society, civilization will be changed by the integration of this technology. And the question for me is, it is our future this dystopian future that we can see in sci-fi movies of AI and Skynet controlling our lives, or like the Wall-E movie where we're all just wearing our headset and we're sitting in a chair and we're big fat people that don't move? I mean, is this the future of humanity? This dystopian integration with technology? We all have a chip in our head, Elon Musk's Neuralink.
Oh my God.
Or is there another path where AI enhances human existence rather than detract from it? What do you
Well,
think, man?
I honestly don't know. It's a very, very scary concept, very scary situation. But going back, I think that power dynamic was spread out to maintain the alpha at the top.
Correct.
And
Yes,
we as humans want to be top dog. We always want to be top dog in command.
of course. And
And and I
historically,
think
of
the
course.
introduction of AI is so scary for us because we're no longer in command. AI is so much more advanced than
Of
us and
course.
our little biological brain that,
Yes.
it can think so much faster in nanoseconds,
Yeah.
and it's going to take our control away from us.
It already has.
It has. Yeah. It's going to get worse.
Of
It's
course
going to
it's
get
going to get
worse
worse, but
with Neuralink. My
oh
God,
my gosh.
why
I
would
mean,
you want to connect
social media.
yourself to?
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Oh,
I
it's
mean,
horrible.
social media and AI are changing the human experience in such a big way. And Stu, like what you said, I mean, AI, he who wields AI, we already know that social media has a way of spreading information in a way they call viral, right?
Yes.
And imagine that he who has control of the microphone, the narrative, and he who wields the power of artificial intelligence is king.
Yes.
This
Yeah.
is why I say these guys in these corporations, your Zucks, your Mark Zuckerbergs, your Musks. These are our new kings. These are the new people, your Jeff Bezos, and all of the billionaires that we don't even know about. Remember, the Forbes list of billionaires, these are
Well,
not the richest people in the world.
no.
The sheikhs over in Iran have a lot more money, right? Putin has a lot of money. So what I'm saying is we're seeing history unfold at an accelerated pace. And
Absolutely.
AI and the integration of AI and social media into our societies,
It's just press the accelerator even more. That's all.
and COVID, right? So
Oh,
COVID was the big accelerator, right? COVID accelerated everything. And it seems like the world has not been normal since COVID.
COVID was the most recent turning point for society in general. It was an absolute nightmare. It was excellent for the Earth as a planet. It was great for the Earth as a planet because it took us out of the equation for, what was it, two or so years, 2.5 years, 3 years, effectively. And it allowed the planet to recover from the abuse that we are doing as humans to the planet.
Now,
All
I
the
think we got to be
pollution and
careful with
everything
that.
else that we're dealing with, it allowed the planet to recover. But for us as societies globally, we didn't know what to do
Right.
because we were so dependent upon the resources that we have, and we couldn't get access to those resources because we were all locked down into our individual abodes and our houses. And it put extra pressure on us as, as societies, as couples, as families, because we were living on top of each other 24 hours a day, 7 days a week
Correct.
for
Why do you think
extended periods of time. And
divorce shot through the roof?
divorce rates shot through the roof, as you said.
Domestic violence shot through the roof.
Exactly.
Alcoholism shot through the roof. Obesity
Exactly.
shot through the roof.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
as a result of all of that and just breaking society to its core, we are now trying to survive and pick up the pieces of what we thought was normal.
But it'll never go back, Stu.
It'll never go back. Never
Since
go
the
back. It's been
pandemic,
broken beyond repair.
well, here's the thing is that it was a house of cards. Before
Yeah,
the pandemic, the whole model of existence, it was a house of cards that was delicately balanced. But the pandemic just made that house of cards collapse, and
totally.
it ripped back the veil, and we could see how dysfunctional, with one major crisis, how dysfunctional society could become.
Yeah.
And since that moment, we have not had a chance to come up for air. It has
Nope.
been one thing after another. Think about it. It was the main COVID variant, then it was the Delta variant, then it was Omicron, then it was the Ukraine Russia war, then it was
Yeah.
AI, and then it,
And we've got Gaza going on now with Israel.
Israel
Gaza.
Hamas thing. It's
The
just
world
one after another,
the world is broken so badly.
right?
Wherever you go, wherever you look, there's nowhere safe
Or
as
sane.
or
I mean,
sane.
I mean,
Sanity is gone.
yeah, yeah,
Sanity is gone. It's not humanity, it's insanity now.
I agree. And it just makes you sad for young generations. I think of my daughter Mackenzie, and
No.
that the world that I grew up in the 90s, which you can say whatever you want. Maybe it was artificial, maybe it wasn't real, maybe it
Yeah.
was an illusion, but it
Yeah.
felt like a safer, happier world in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And
There were less stresses
there
back
were
then.
less stresses. And I think that one of the main issues is that the internet and social media flood up they flood us with information, but not necessarily truth. We are bombarded with information and data. This is happening here, and this is happening here, and this is happening here, but we don't even know what's real and what's not real.
Exactly.
So,
And the problem is that, that, as you say, that the computer chip and data is just there's so much of it. You don't know what you can't critically think. You don't have time to think because you've got so much coming at you, so much in such a short time that you can't think critically as to say, well, this is right, this is wrong, this is not what I believe, and you have no idea, and your head is spinning.
That's
You
right.
have absolutely no clue what's going on and what way's up. You have no idea.
That's right.
And of course, as you've recently had in previous election campaigns and things like that, and Trump saying fake news and all this stuff, which is true. How can we generate and know exactly what is truth and what is untruth? We
Well,
can't.
that's what I'm saying about the 90s, Stu, is like maybe we look at the 90s as this utopian era because the veil had not been lifted. We couldn't see what was happening behind the curtains. We only saw
Mhm.
the superficial, the
Exactly.
mirage, the illusion that everything was
Exactly.
hunky dory,
Yeah.
when perhaps, you know, the narrative, maybe we've always been spoon-fed BS. And the difference between us now,
Yeah.
us in the 90s, is now it's for some reason, I feel like criminals and corrupt politicians have become emboldened, you know?
Yes.
And now it's almost like in the 90s, at least corruption and crime, they tried to hide it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
now
The
crime and
facade the
corruption is so
facade has been taken down.
correct.
The
This is what
facade
I'm saying.
has been removed.
The veil has
Um,
been lifted.
yeah,
This is what
absolutely.
I'm saying. So now we just see people with no regard for, and we see people in politics, leaders, public figures. I mean, look at what's happening with P. Diddy, right? P. Diddy, a music mogul, a billionaire, a
Hmm.
self-made billionaire, and he's being investigated for sex trafficking.
Oh
So,
my God.
I mean, look at Bill Cosby, right? I mean, in the
Yeah.
90s, Bill Cosby was America's uncle.
Yeah.
Turns out he was raping people, right?
Yeah. It's
So this is what I'm saying is perhaps the world that we thought was amazing was just an illusion. Maybe it was all Bill Cosby. Maybe it was all a sitcom. Maybe we were drinking the Kool-Aid. And now we see, oh, it's not what we thought. It's actually really dysfunctional and screwed up,
hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
Stu, I think this is a great place to stop, and I hope that you'll come back on for another episode. We can continue developing these ideas and
I would
talk about
definitely love that. I
where
would
we're
love
going.
to come back on and if you allow it to be a regular
Yes,
on
Stu,
here.
you bet, my friend. You bet.
Yeah.
I want to have you on with other guests, man.
Okay.
So let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Happy Accidents podcast. This is Stuart Ness. Stuart, if you could tell anyone who wants to get a hold of you how they can contact you. Stuart is an excellent English teacher. Stuart's got years of experience. We actually met working together at Fulbright. So, Stuart, how can people contact you?
Yeah. You can contact me through WhatsApp. Um, I'd be a bit wary of putting my cell number up here, but
Just your email.
my email is Stuart mwness@gmail.com. So you can get hold of me through there, and then we can work out any further contact details that you may or may not need. I've been teaching English, as I say, I've been in Ecuador for 16 years. Of those 16 years, I've been teaching English for, I would say, 14 and a half to 15 of them. And I've
Perfect.
I've been teaching English from, those students who have zero idea of the language up to near native. And I
Correct.
cover all skill sets, be it reading, writing, listening, speaking, all of it. So if you need help, reach out.
He's the guy. Awesome, buddy. Also, if you need to contact Stuart, send me a message. I'll put you in touch with Stuart. I'll send you his contact info. And guys, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, if you want to see more, or if you have suggestions for topics that you would like to hear us talk about, or if you have suggestions for different guests please put those in the comments below. Guys, have a great one. God bless and happy Good Friday.
Exactly. I was going to say, Steve, just to wish everyone a happy Easter. Have a great Semana Santa if you're here in Ecuador with us. But have a happy Easter and do whatever you do. Make sure it's fun, but do it safely.
That's right.
Take
We'll
care.
end on that.